Welcome to LifePoint today. If you're here in the building, would you please stand with us while we worship? If you're watching online, we're glad you're here today. Come on and worship with us. Does anybody got a testimony today? Can you think about anything that God has done for you? Something to testify about. Something to say something good about.
I saw darkness run for cover, but the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven, and I believe in signs and wonders. I have resurrection power, yes I do. Still the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven, and my praise belongs to you forever. This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. We'll come together, sons and daughters, bought with blood and washed in water. Sing the praises of the Spirit, Son and Father. Our God will finish what He started. Oh, our God, He'll finish what He started. This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify, like Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Oh. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. 'Cause this is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story, and I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. Oh, I'm alive. This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous, I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Oh. Good God Almighty, I hope you'll find me praising your name no matter what comes, 'cause I know where I'd be without your mercy, so I keep praising your name at the top of my lungs. times I've called your name some broken nights, and you showed up and patched me up like you do every time. I get amnesia, gonna keep you coming around. Ain't no way you'll ever let me down. Well, good God Almighty, I hope you'll find me praising your name no matter what comes. 'Cause I know where I'd be without your mercy. So I keep praising your name at the top of my lungs. Tell me, is he good?
He's good.
Tell me, is he God?
He's God.
He is good, God Almighty. You say your love goes on forever, that your mercy never stops. So why would I assume you'd be somebody that you're not? Sun in the morning, I know you're gonna be there every day. So what on earth could make me be afraid? Good God Almighty, I hope you'll find me praising your name no matter what comes. 'Cause I know where I'd be without your mercy. So I keep praising your name at the top of my lungs. Tell me, is he good?
He's good.
Tell me, is he God?
He's God.
He is good, God Almighty. Praise him in the morning, praise him in the noontime, praise him when the sun goes down. Love him in the morning, love him in the noontime, love him when the sun goes down. Good God Almighty, I hope you'll find me praising your name no matter what comes. 'Cause I know where I'd be without your mercy. So I keep praising your name at the top of my lungs. Tell me, is he good?
He's good.
Tell me, is he God?
He's God.
He is good, God Almighty. Jesus in the morning, Jesus in the noontime, Jesus when the sun goes down. Jesus in the morning, Jesus in the noontime, Jesus when the sun goes down. Good God Almighty, I hope you'll find me praising your name no matter what comes. 'Cause I know where I'd be without your mercy. So I keep praising your name at the top of my lungs. Tell me, is he good?
He's good.
Tell me, is he God?
He's God.
He is good, God Almighty.
Amen. Amen. You know, in today's world, we have to let the world know that God is good and that he is the good God Almighty. And as I mentioned earlier in the first service, and I'll say it again, that sometimes wind comes in and it gets stale. If you think about the news and you watch the news at 6 o'clock and then 7 o'clock rolls around if you haven't left, and the same story rolls back over again, and then 8 o'clock the same story will roll back over again, and maybe there's a little bit of a change, but it's all the same. And then day after day after day after day, it's all the same, it's all the same, it's all the same. We're fed the same. You look in your Instagram feed and you look in your Facebook feed. That's why it's called a feed, because it's what is feeding us day after day after day. And oftentimes when we're in that, we need something fresh. We need a word from God. We need his spirit to come into our lives and bring about something fresh so that we can move about in this world in a fresh way, so that we can share a fresh wind everywhere that we are, whether we're at home or at church or at work or wherever we might be, in the grocery store. We can bring that fresh wind along with us. Amen.
Spirit sound, rushing wind, fire of God, fall within. Holy Ghost, breathe on us, we pray. As we repent, turn from sin, revival embers smoldering. Breath of God, fan us into flame. And we need a fresh wind, the fragrance of heaven. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out.
For hearts that burn with holy fear, purified in faith and deed, refiners fire, strengthen what remains. So we the church to bear your light, lamp of flame, city bright, King and kingdom come is what we pray. We need a fresh wind, the fragrance of heaven. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out. A holy anointing, the power of your presence. Pour your spirit out, 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 pour your spirit
Prophesy and see. We can hear the wind blowing, blowing, blowing. Move upon our praise. Sons and daughters sing. We can hear the wind blowing, blowing, blowing. Let us all be redeemed. Prophesy, 'cause we can hear move upon our praise. Sons and daughters, 'cause we can hear
fresh wind, the fragrance of heaven. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out. A holy anointing, the power of your presence. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out. And we need a fresh wind, the fragrance of heaven. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out. A holy anointing, the power of your presence. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out,
pour your spirit out.
Oh God, we thank you. We ask that you would just move upon our hearts, oh God. Pour your spirit out upon us, oh Lord. We are here for you, God. We were made for your purpose, oh Lord. We ask that you would just bless us, empower us, fill us, and move us by your spirit, Lord. God, we thank you and we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Turn, maybe look to your left or to your right. Say hello and welcome each other here this morning.
Well, good morning, LifePoint Church. We are so glad that you're all joining us today, whether you're here in person or online, as we worship and grow together. For any of you who are new, I want to give a special welcome and say that we're really glad you took some time out of your day to come spend with us and get to know us a little bit.
And if you are new, you'll find a red card that says new in the seat next to you. We'd like you to fill it out, drop it off at the welcome table in the lobby. There you'll also find a small gift just to welcome you here. Also in the seats, you'll find a blue Next Step card. This is for those who'd like to take the next step in their faith and maybe become part of a ministry, maybe serve in some capacity here at LifePoint. Please fill that out, drop it off in the offering box on your way out. And lastly, in your row, you should see a gray prayer card. Please fill that out if you have a prayer request. Our prayer team prays over those requests weekly. You can also drop that off in the offering box on your way out of the auditorium today. And if you're joining us online, digital versions of these cards are available. If you're watching live, they're available in the chat. And if you're watching on YouTube, they're available in the description below.
The best way to stay up to date with all things LifePoint is to download the Church Center app. On the app, you can do a lot of things like joining a life group, signing up for an event, or even starting online giving. If you haven't done it, make sure you pull out your phone right now and start downloading it and get connected right away.
If you have a child with you and they're getting a little restless during the service, just outside the auditorium doors is the nursing mother and crying child room. Please feel free to use that room. Also, there's audio and video in there, so you won't miss out on the message.
We have a baptism service coming up November 28th. Today, after both services at the front of the auditorium, Pastor Glenn is going to be hosting a baptism orientation meeting. This meeting is for anyone who has already signed up for baptism or is interested in baptism and has questions. You'll learn about why baptism is such an important next step in your faith, as well as how it works here at LifePoint. A few weeks ago, we had our grand opening here at LifePoint, and there was a lot of invitation that happened leading up to that. But just because grand opening's over doesn't mean the invites have to stop. Make sure you pick up an I Love My Church card from the welcome table on your way out today. These are a great tool to use to invite your family, your friends, your co-workers, and anyone you meet to come here to LifePoint and hear the message of Jesus. So make sure you grab a few and put them in your wallet or purse so that you have them on hand whenever the opportunity arises to invite somebody to church.
Up next, bringing this week's Life Connection is our lead pastor, Glenn Pfeiffer.
So, let's dive in together.
Good morning, LifePoint. Great to see you today. Great to be together, and want to welcome those of you watching our live stream as well. Welcome to you and those watching later via YouTube, and excited to be together. And today we're continuing our series, Mixed Emojis, and I want to look at an emoji today that we don't really use that much. I mean, we like the thumbs up emoji, we got the heart emoji, the smile emoji, but today we're going to look at the grief emoji. We're going to look at grieving and that emotional pain that we go through in this life, that there are times, no matter what stage we're in, we're going to struggle and we're going to work through things that maybe we never even saw coming. And so we're going to look at that today, because the truth is, if we live long enough, we're going to lose something important to us, or we're going to lose someone that we love. And working through that is always going to be a challenge. And there are different degrees of pain and suffering and grieving. You know, we can suffer loss, a sense of loss, by just changing jobs, for example. We could change jobs and it's like, wow, my relationships are now redefined. I don't see them at the office anymore. And it's like, oh, I miss that. And I miss seeing. I know some people you're probably like glad you don't see. You're like, yeah, I'm glad I don't see them. But these other people, I miss those relationships. Or the routine changes up. It's like, I don't go by the Dunkin' Donuts like I used to, you know, on the way, or this. We change things up. and that can be hard. As our kids get older, they move out of the house, and there's this moment as a parent where we're thinking, I just wish it were a little more quiet in the house. And then one day you wake up and it is, and you're like, whoa, the silence is deafening. And it's like, and we grieve because we got this empty nest thing going on, and the kids are gone, and they're here or there, and you wish you could see them more. And that's hard too. But grieving can go way further. It can get deeper. And if you've ever had a pet, you know how that feels, to love a pet and then to lose a pet, and how hard that can be. We had a dog a few years ago named Cooper. He was a black lab, and he was an awesome family pet. And we love this dog. We took him everywhere with us. He was with our kids when they were younger, and they grew up together. And he would, run around the backyard. We'd do all these road trips together, throw him in the car. I have 4 kids. Throw him in the car with the 4 kids, and we just go everywhere and have a great time. And Cooper had his quirks. He had his quirks. He was a very tall dog as a lab, and he was outrageously fast, like incredibly fast. This dog would just boom. He was like a lightning bolt. He also had this very weird tendency to spin like a wild man before he would do his business in the backyard. And not just like a spin, but I'm talking about centrifugal forces that send off air in all directions. Like, how does this dog even survive the spin? And I don't know if it's like inbred in them that they go into weeds or reeds and they gotta, kind of clear a path for them to do the business thing. And well, he was great at that. He was a gentle guy, but he also had a very ferocious bark. So if you were breaking into our house, I would just say, Cooper, could you go over to the door because there's something going on over there? And he would bark, and 100%, anybody trying to get in that door, hightailing it out to the next house, because Cooper sounded like he probably weighed 300 pounds and was just a beast of a dog. He had a really, really scary bark. And we loved this dog and did so much with him. But one day I woke up and I went to work, and I came back at lunch, and he wasn't able to use his back legs anymore. And we didn't know exactly what happened, and we found out from the vet that he had a stroke. It looked like he was never going to recover. They said he won't rebound from this. And it was a shock to us. He was 11 years old. We thought we'd have him a little bit longer, but that wasn't going to be the case. And that night, Denise decided not to sleep with me. She slept on the floor in the living room with Cooper, and they slept together. And the next morning, it was my job to bring him to the vet, and I did that, and I spent a couple hours with him, just laid with him too. And I picked him up, and I put him in the car, and I brought him to the vet, and I cried. Because I'm an emotional person, and it hit me. And I went in there, and we put him to sleep, and I was coming out, and there was Julie. And Julie, maybe you're here today. Julie's from our church, and Julie is a very outgoing, bubbly person, and she's in the waiting room as I'm coming out after all of this, and she goes, "Hi, Pastor Glenn, how are you?" And I'm like, oh no, I'm not so good. I mustered a smile, and I said, I've had better days. And I went home, and it wasn't raining outside, but it was raining inside that car, because my tears just flowed the whole way home, and it was painful, and it lasted. I suffered. We all suffered. Our kids suffered. Maybe you know what that's like. But grieving can even cut deeper. It can be even much more severe. When we lose a job, and we're like, I don't know, I can't pay my bills. What's my future? Will I get another job? And we worry about that kind of thing. Or we were injured, and our physical body that we're counting on to do the things we need to do, we're unable to do the things we once did, or we become ill and we get some really bad news. And all of this can create intense grief and a real sense of loss. But the greatest loss of all, and the most severe grieving, happens when a relationship that we value is taken away from us. Maybe through a divorce. A divorce can be brutally, brutally painful. But by far the worst pain, studies tell us, the worst pain a human experiences is when they lose a spouse or a child, when they die. And it's just something some people are so devastated by, they wonder if they could ever recover. And over the years, I've been doing this a long time. I've seen a lot of responses to suffering and pain. And some people suffer and they go through this grieving process and it just seems to destroy them. They become a shell of the person that they once were. They're bitter and they're angry, they're frustrated, and they're jealous because they look at other people and say, you don't go through this. You don't have to deal with this. I do. I don't know why. And there's this sense of, I just wish I had your situation, but I don't, and I'm angry, and I'm frustrated, and I'm wounded by all this. Others withdraw, and they go into a personal space, a private space, kind of go into their house, and they basically pull the shades down, and they withdraw into their own world, and they shut everybody out, and they just get more bitter over time in that darkness. Some go stoic and say, I'm just not going to show any emotion at all. I'm just going to go stoic at this and kind of get stuck in this denial, no emotion, no tears. And yet, inevitably, the pain in their lives leaks out into their current relationships, and it affects things that they don't even know about. Still, others get to this point where they set up a shrine to the deceased person, and they just don't want to move on. They don't want to move on, and they act like they're still here, and they do that because they feel that if they move on, that they will have forgotten the one who died, and they can't do that. So they refuse to move on, and they carry that pain, and they rehearse that hurt, and they hurt themselves, and the pain just recurs. They won't let it go. I think that can happen to us easily, and I've seen it many times over the years that grief is universal, but for some people, it makes their lives far darker because of how they respond to it. But I've seen others go through exactly the same situation. Severe loss in their lives, the loss of a spouse, the loss of a child, and somehow they grieve and it hurts and it's brutal, and yet somehow they work themselves forward to a healthier place. The same horrible event, but they come to this moment where they begin to move towards a new, unchosen normal, a world they would never choose, do not want, that they hate in the worst way, but they begin to see that I can move forward, and God wants us to move forward. And this new normal is life-changing. But some people, they die with the one who dies, and God never wants that to happen. They never want to forget their loss, so they hold on to the grief, and they never find themselves getting better. And a huge part of grieving, a huge part of moving forward with our lives is understanding God in a different way than we might imagine. It's understanding what God thinks about all this, what God thinks about our suffering, his involvement in our lives, and what he's like. Because when we understand that can radically alter how we grieve. It can give us strength to move forward. And today I want to look at the story of Lazarus, and it's a story that you may know of if you've read the Bible over the years. Maybe it's brand new to you. It's the story of Lazarus and his two sisters, Mary and Martha, and the brutal suffering that they faced when one day Lazarus died. The story is found in John chapter 11, and it begins this way. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. This is the story of a family that Jesus was really close to. He was really close to Lazarus. He was really close to Mary and Martha. So close, in fact, that when Jesus was in Bethany or the area around Bethany, he made his way to their house. They had an open invitation to stay at their home, and Jesus took him up on that, and he spent time in Mary and Martha's house. And Mary and Martha and Lazarus, They were close personal friends. They loved each other. And along the way, you can imagine as Jesus would do this public teaching, he'd be done for the day and he'd go hang out at Lazarus' house and with Mary and Martha. And you can imagine him, eating together and talking together and, getting up in the morning. And wouldn't it have been amazing to be at the house? And Jesus is like hanging out on the sofa and Mary and Martha are over there. And it's like, Jesus is like, yeah, can you pass a donut over there? Yeah, got a donut. Martha, could you get a croissant going for me? Just a little toasted, because I like it that way, and a little jelly on it. And they're like, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to do that. And so they had a close relationship. Imagine Jesus expanding on his public teaching. And there were times where Jesus would be at their house and Mary would sit at Jesus' feet because she wanted to learn so much. And Martha would work in the kitchen because men like to eat, right? They like to eat. So Martha's like, I'm going to go make him a sandwich and make him some stuff because she loved him. And Mary actually one time took expensive perfume and anointed his body with this perfume as a statement of her extravagant devotion and love for him. Because Jesus, they had learned, was much more than just another man, a prophet. They were learning that he was the Son of God, the Savior of the world, the Messiah, and they loved him, and they were devoted to him, and they were passionately committed to him. And all of this is happening, and this is what really makes what happens next very, very difficult, super, super challenging. This is when tragedy struck, because Lazarus, the one that Jesus loved, suddenly got sick. He got so sick that he died. And it was devastating. He got this news he was sick. The prognosis was not good. The doctor said, you're not going to make it. And it happened just as they said, and he died. And it's a reminder to us of how screwed up our world really is. That somebody so close to Jesus would himself die just like that. A personal friend, their life would just be over within just a short period of time. And it reminds us of how messed up this world is. That this world is not as God intended. That when God created this world, he created a world with health and harmony, with good relationships with each other, a powerful, intimate connection with him between the creator and the created. And the world was awesome. It was Eden. It was a place of paradise. It was all that we longed that life would be. And then sin came into the picture. Self-willed ways that we as human beings would say, I don't need you, God. I'll declare my independence from you. I don't need you to call the shots or lead my life anymore. And as a result, the world fell apart. God allowed people to live the way they were because they had that free will. And it devastated relationships. It alienated us from God, and sin and suffering entered the picture. It's really something Jesus tells us about too when he says that in this world, you will have trouble. It's not the way I created it. You're going to have trouble. And the rain, Jesus says, falls on the righteous and the unrighteous. And sometimes we have this idea that when we're suffering or grieving or we've gone through loss, that God is punishing me. We have this idea, but the truth is that the rain falls on the righteous too. Those who are serving God and seeking God, we're all in the same boat. We're all going to grieve at one time or another. Suffering is universal. It's the painful reality that we all face. And in this case, the rain suddenly was falling really, really hard on this man that he loved and on Martha and Mary. And Jesus hears this news, and it says this in verse 4. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Now, it's at this part in the story that things are getting messed up. Things are getting really confusing here. Jesus does 2 things here that make us seriously question him. question and even doubt him here. The first thing is he says that this sickness is not unto death. But then just a short time later, they get the news that Lazarus is in fact dead. He did die, and the disciples are like, wait a minute, I'm starting to believe everything that you've said. I've seen your miracles, I've seen your power. I know there's an anointing on your words that you speak, and yet that you've told us that he wouldn't die, but he did die. Did you make a mistake? Are you wrong? Are you really the Messiah? You just didn't get it right, Jesus. And the disciples had to be scratching their heads. And then there's this other confusing part that Jesus gets word that Lazarus is sick, and instead of going right away to try to do something about it, he waits 2 days. Now, it's very likely that Lazarus had died by the time Jesus got the news. But why didn't he go? Why did he delay? Why did he leave them in their grief? It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Jesus just doesn't look good here. He doesn't seem to be getting his facts straight. He doesn't seem to be the caring God. He seems cold, maybe callous, uncaring. And I think if we're honest, when we face suffering, when we face pain in our own lives, it's easy for us to have questions too. You see, suffering tempts all of us to take a dark view of life and a dim view of God. Suffering tempts all of us to take a dark view of this life and a dim view of God. To say, God, I hear your promises. Your promises are great, and it sounds like you got my future in mind, and they look great on paper. But it doesn't seem to be changing my life. My life is still hard. My life is still brutal. Nothing is changing. And we can question, did you make a mistake when you said that to me? Is that actually true? My pain is exactly the same. And are you really caring? Because why didn't you intervene? Why didn't you change the circumstance? Why didn't you show up a little bit earlier? It could have turned it all around. Why did this actually have to happen the way it did? You could have changed the course of events, but you didn't. And we look at this, and we're like the disciples. We can get confused. Sometimes people blame God. They accuse God of this. And it's easy for us to suffer, to grieve, and take a dark view of this world and of life and a dim view of God. But what if there's a powerful, life-changing, joy-infusing, joy-restoring alternative to the dark world and dim view of God mentality? What if God is working in a way that explains some of these things? Some of that explanation we'll get, and some we don't. But what if God isn't the mistake-prone God we might think he is? What if he's not cold or callous at all? What if there's a plan in mind to bring something good even out of the ashes of our pain and suffering? See, Jesus waited 2 days after hearing the news of Lazarus' death, and soon he reveals why. In verse 17, it says, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. So he waited 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Martha has sent word 4 days earlier to Jesus, and she waited, and he didn't come. And finally, Jesus is showing up in town after a 4-day delay, and Martha leaves the house that they've been in 1,000,000 times, sitting together, casually talking as friends. She leaves this house and runs out and meets him on the road and says to him, if only Jesus, if only you had come earlier. If only you had just come, this whole circumstance would not have happened. You could have turned it around. You could have done something. And it speaks here of the raw emotion of the moment. The exact same raw emotion that Mary felt too, when soon she did the exact same thing. She leaves the house, she goes out, she meets Jesus and says, if only you had come, my brother would be okay, but you didn't come. And this speaks of the pain that they felt, the confusion that ushered through their minds, the scenarios they ran that didn't make a lot of sense. They just weren't putting all the pieces together. And this can happen to us too when we face suffering and loss in our own lives. It's like, why did I lose this job? I need this job. I got a family to take care of. I've got this illness and I don't know if I'm gonna recover from it or how it's gonna affect me and my future. We look at relationships and say, man, why did that guy dump me? Why did she ghost me? I thought this was working out. It's like, I don't know where my future relationships are going. And we run the if only Jesus, you turn this around, I wouldn't be grieving right now. If only you had come at the right moments, life would have been better, but you didn't. And sometimes these questions can lead us to become angry. We can accuse God. We can blame him. And sometimes we can easily run from him and turn from him and never return. But this is the moment where God comes along and says, there's an alternative to this dark view of life and dim view of God. And this is an alternative that is available to real people. Because what I love about Scripture is that it doesn't super spiritualize people. See, that's the one thing I love about faith. There's a lot of caricatures of faith out there. And one is that everything's a praise the Lord. Everything is, isn't this awesome? Isn't this great? All is good. And guess what? It's not sometimes. Life can be brutal. It can hit us like a brick, a shot to the gut. We can barely catch our breath. And what I love about this story is the honesty, that it doesn't super spiritualize Mary and Martha because they were hurting. They were grieving. And as human beings, that's what happens to us. We face emotional suffering. If you live long enough, it's going to hit you. And this is true for them. They were in the midst of emotional suffering. There's the denial that can happen to us where we just kind of get into denial and say, this can't be happening. This can't happen. We're in shock. And we kind of get into this anger. We're just angry about life. And then maybe we start bargaining. And I know people over the years who've bargained with God. They're like, listen, God, if you come through right now, I promise you, if you heal my friend, I will serve you the rest of my days. I will sell my Jeep and I will give the proceeds to your work in the world. 100%, God. I will bargain with God. And we do that. We bargain. And then we also face depression. Depression is real. It has nothing to do with the fact that, I should have faith. No, we're human beings. We hurt. Depression can be very, very real in our lives, but God wants to move us to the next stage every time where we accept the new normal, not because we would choose it, but because God is working and he is not going to leave us and he moves us to our next step. And I love how Mary and Martha are so real, but they come to this moment of choice. Are they going to choose the dark view of this world and dim view of God? Or are they going to go another route? And that's exactly what they did. Mary has all these feelings. She has all this weight. She's carrying all this pain. She's suffering such an enormous loss. And she says in this moment, I still believe. John 11:27. Yes, Lord, she told him, I believe. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. She's brokenhearted. She's devastated. She doesn't know how she's going to move on, but she refuses to become bitter. She refuses to be an angry person, going through life with a negativity that spins everything else that happens. She refuses that path and says, I still believe. And it's good that she did, because it was in that moment that God began to reveal some things he was doing and how, in fact, he works in the midst of our suffering. She learned a lot more about Jesus in her deepest pain. We see first that God works through our suffering to accomplish things we may not yet see. We see that in this story, that God works through our suffering, through the ashes of our lives, through the brokenness of our lives, to do things that we don't often see. You see, the big question in this story is, why the delay? Even if Lazarus had already been dead and Jesus didn't show up to heal him, why didn't he go right away to help his friends? Why 4 days? What exactly was going on? It turns out that Jesus' delay accomplished something, a purpose that no one could yet see. You see, ancient sources tell us that the rabbinic belief at the time was kind of a spiritual superstition that the rabbis taught and that people were thinking about a lot, and it was that when a person died, their soul would leave their body and hover over them for 4 days. And so that soul would hover over them for 4 days, hoping to re-enter the person, the deceased person. But once the body began to decompose, the soul said, this isn't going to work, I can't inhabit this body anymore, and it would disappear. It would move beyond that person. What's happening here is really important. Jesus planned this all along, and there was a reason he waited 4 days. He waited 4 days so that none of his opponents, none of the religious leaders who hated him could say that Lazarus actually didn't die after all. He just fainted. He just kind of fell asleep, and he just needed a splash of water on his face, and boom, he's back up. And well, no, after 4 days, it was absolutely certain. Everyone knew he was certifiably dead. And we also learn here that Jesus was not the cold, callous, uncaring person. He does this because he has a plan, so that the miracle of resurrection would have no other explanation other than the obvious one, that Jesus alone has unprecedented power to raise the dead. Unlike anyone else who's ever lived, who lived at that time, there's no other explanation. He was dead, he's alive. Jesus is the one who made it happen. I think this reminds us that there's going to be times when we suffer, when we look at circumstances and we don't make any sense of it. It just doesn't come together. It's not logical. We can think of a lot of other ways God could have gone with things, and it didn't happen that way. And yes, we hear verses about how God works all things together for good, for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And we believe that. But there are moments we don't feel it. We don't feel it. And we're tempted to say that if I don't understand it, then I need to turn from God. But the Bible says, that trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. That there's this competition between trust and understanding. And it doesn't mean we don't seek knowledge. We don't seek facts and truth. We do all that too. But in the end, there is a trust component that God calls us to. And that gets tested most severely when we suffer. And yet we see Mary and Martha learning something, that God was working in a way they did not yet see. We also learn here that God comforts us in our grief and suffering. God comforts us when we're in pain and we're broken. And that was in contrast to what a lot of people believed in the first century. The Greek gods at this time, which were prevalent, they were everywhere. There were gods in the first century everywhere. There's a god for everything imaginable in the first century. And if you've read about the Greek gods, well, they don't have a great reputation. They're just kind of vindictive, angry beings who want to manipulate everything. And what we learn about the Greek gods is that there is no emotion from them. There's no empathy. There's just total apathy. They don't care about others. They don't care about any of those things. In fact, there's no compassion from them at all. They are aloof, uncaring, busy, and distracted. And what we learn in this story is that Jesus is none of those things. And we learn about the heart of God by reading the shortest verse in the entire Bible. It's found in verse 35. It says this: Jesus wept. Jesus wept. The language here speaks of deep, profound sadness and a quiet shedding of tears. Not like the professional mourners. When somebody died in the first century, you have professional mourners, and they're like, wow, wow, wailing, wow, well. Like, it's all like an act. Like they're doing, you get them to go do that. And they're like, boy, that's really, really caring. And no, actually, they're going to go home and have a sandwich and go on with their lives. It's not real grief for them. They're just acting. Well, Jesus' pain was deep and personal. From his inner core, he was broken up. It says he wept. And what's really fascinating about that is that Jesus wept, and think about this. Jesus wept even though he knew in just a few minutes he was going to raise from Lazarus from the dead anyway. In just a few minutes, the cause of their grief and pain was going to go away. And Jesus wept and cried and sobbed with them anyway. And we're like, well, why? Why would he do that? Because we learned something about God and how much he loves you and what he's really like. It really tells us that when we're hurting for any reason, he's hurting. When we cry, he sheds tears. When we're brokenhearted, he's brokenhearted. When we suffer, he suffers. When we grieve, he grieves. He loves us so much that he came to this planet to actually experience that pain so that he could give us help when we're struggling, help when we're hurting. Hebrews 4 talks about this, describes Jesus as a high priest. It says, this high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all the same testings we did, yet he did not sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy, and we will find grace to help us when we need it most. I love this because it describes God, how God doesn't come often. Maybe you've talked to somebody and you've been hurting and you've lost someone and somebody's come and said things to you and you're like, man, that didn't help me. And sometimes we think God says these kinds of things like, just get over it. Just get over it. Move on with your life. Just suck it up. Come on. Have more faith. Just have more faith. And we're thinking, man, that's not helping me much. But notice Jesus didn't say any of those things. Instead, he comes alongside Mary and Martha and embraces them and gently weeps with them. And he leads them to a better place. He comes alongside and he holds them and he loves them through this grieving process so that they get to a better place. But all of this means very little if what happens next doesn't happen. It's not enough to have a God in the heavens who loves us, maybe a grandfatherly, God who's, on a rocking chair, and every once in a while he gets woken up and it's like, oh yeah, stuff's going on. Oh, I feel so bad that you're going through that. It's really bad. I mean, I'm there for you. It's good. And all. And so that's great. Have a caring God in the heavens. But can he do something about it? That's the ultimate test of who God is. It's the ultimate expression of his nature. Because here's the thing. We can discover in our suffering immense, joy-restoring, life-changing hope. Because God isn't just identifying with our struggle. He's also going to do something about it. Because he has a plan to one day permanently end all suffering and death. He has a plan. He looks at this world and says, it's so screwed up. I can't stand it anymore. And he's going to do something about it. And it's really interesting to unpack this passage a little bit more because there's something in the Greek that we wouldn't see just reading it in our English text. It's found in verse 33. It says that Jesus sees Mary weeping, and it says, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. He was deeply moved. This word is really a curveball because it speaks of sternness, dead seriousness, unrelenting. It's a word that speaks of anger. He's flat out mad. And it's a strange emotion in the midst of this. But Jesus was angry, deeply grieved in spirit, angry at the whole of a series of events, angry at everything that had happened. He's angry that Lazarus has suffered and died. He's angry that Mary and Martha are suffering this loss for a brother they love dearly. He's angry that so many people there's widespread grief everywhere because so many people love Lazarus. He's angry that the fact that in the end he's going to face a world that rejects him. He's angry at the power of sin that made all this happen. He's angry at the tyranny of Satan, who uses suffering, and he will do this to you, and he does it to people all the time, the tyranny of Satan who uses suffering to make accusations about God. See, you're suffering, therefore God hates you. You're suffering, therefore God has abandoned you. You're suffering, therefore God is not good. God himself, Jesus himself, is angry at the false accusations made against him and his Father and the tyranny of Satan himself. He's angry that human beings whom he loves have to face death at all. The whole event here, this whole event, speaks of the universal suffering that we all go through. And that's what makes him angry, but that's what makes him determined and compelled to come to this earth and to do something about it. And this means suffering is not the final word. That death itself will be defeated and the enemy of our soul will be vanquished. That even as Lazarus would rise from the dead, so we will rise from the dead when our life is over too. And here we get a picture of this in John 11. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. This is the best news possible, that in fact we have hope beyond the grave, that those who precede us, who have a relationship with Jesus, who love him, will be with the one that they love, and they will be fine. They're in his presence. He loves them, and he will defeat death once and for all, not only in our lives, but in all those in whom we love, because he has resurrection power that is unprecedented, unparalleled. No one else can display that kind of authority. And as I think about how our future, because of resurrection life, our future is so amazing. And that's why when I read this story, I think that Lazarus arguably might be the most unfortunate person who's ever lived. The most unfortunate person. Like when you read the Bible stories, there are people you're like, yeah, I'd love to be that person. I'd like to do that. That's cool. And you're looking at other ones, you're like, no, that's a no. No, I don't want that to happen. Don't want to do that. Lazarus, for me, is the bottom of the list. I don't want to be him at all. Because think about this guy, okay? Here's a man who loves the Lord and has a relationship with him, and he dies, okay? He gets his fever, he's sick, and his body is aching, and the prognosis is bad. And the doctor says, you're not gonna make it, and the guy dies, and all these people are like grieving over him, and Lazarus dies, but immediately, 1 millisecond after death, he goes up and he's in God's presence. Just like that, immediately, absent with the body, present with the Lord. He's with the Lord. He's in paradise. He's in Abraham's bosom. He's doing great. If he could send emojis down from heaven, it would be thumbs up, smiley face, heart, see you soon. Because there's no time. I'll see you real soon, and I can't wait for that moment. So here he is. He's like at peace. He's like, whoo, wow, I'm so glad I got that over with. You know, it's like, man, the transition is the hard part. It's like, I transitioned, I'm here. This is a good moment. And then it happens. He's just there in paradise, at peace, waiting for his family to come back. And then he hears a stone roll away. And he hears his name, and it's like, Lazarus. He's like, oh no, is that Jesus? I recognize that voice. And it's Lazarus, it's Jesus calling his name, Lazarus. And he has so much power, he's pulling him back from this paradise to the land of the living. And you can imagine Lazarus going, no. And he's like hanging on to Abraham, like Abraham. And Abraham's like, go, dude, go. It's Jesus, you gotta go. And it's like, he's got his heels in the ground, I'm not going. But Jesus has so much power. Back into the land of the living. And there's no doubt this guy, he's like grateful he gets to see his family again. But honestly, it's the worst possible scenario because he's the only man in human history who had to die twice. Who wants to be that guy? I don't know. But here's the deal. That this story reminds us that God has a plan even when we don't see it. He will bring beauty and life from the ashes of our lives. He's a God of all comfort that will never leave us or forsake us. He's a God that comes alongside us and lifts us when we don't feel like we can take another step. And he's a God who will deliver us once and for all from our fiercest enemy, from death itself. So while we wait for our resurrection moment, lean into him, trust him, reject the dark view of the world, dim view of God mentality, and place your hope in the resurrection power of the one true God, of Jesus Christ himself. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you love us through our struggles. You don't condemn us. You don't look down on us. You don't berate us and say, you should have more faith. Why aren't you getting over this? You don't say any of those things. You come alongside us and you love us forward. You help us get to a new normal, a hard new normal, but a place where we know you lead. And you will never leave. You will never forsake. You will never abandon. And in the end, you will prove your faithfulness with this resurrection power that leads to this new heaven and a new earth, where together with all those who love you, we will just live lives of gratitude forever, that you've overcome, that your power prevailed, and that we can spend forever with you. And this hope changes how we grieve. And we give you praise and thanks for that. In Jesus' name, amen. At this time, I just want to remind you of our offering this morning. Thank you to those of you who give to our church. You're a huge blessing and making everything happen here. And there are multiple ways that you can give. We have boxes in the back. If you want to give on the way out, you can throw a check in there. We also have online giving where you can give a repeating gift or a one-time gift. And you can also send a check to the church if you'd like to do that. Numbers of you are doing that as well. So thank you for that. We want to say, as we do each week, that if you're new among us, please don't feel an obligation to give to the offering. We're just glad you're here, glad you're joined us this morning, and hope you feel encouraged and inspired today, and that you'll take another step closer to the Lord on your journey. And again, thank you to all of you for what God is doing here, and may God bless you.
Would you please stand with us as we worship together? Just think about that message and just think about the time of waiting, and you think, come on, Jesus, you can do this. You can move in this situation. You can prevent me from even grieving about it in the first place if you just swoop in. And then a little bit of time passes and you think, there's still a little bit of space there, you still can step in. And then he doesn't, and it leaves that immediate feeling of grief. But God is telling us, I'm with you even in that feeling of grief. I'm acquainted with your feelings. I'm very familiar, and I wouldn't leave you alone in it. And in those times when we're waiting, and we're waiting for that wonderful day of hope when we are transitioned into life eternal. During that time, he's with us and he's telling us he's enough. His love is enough. His comfort is enough. His grace is enough. He's with us.
And I've never been more loved than I am right now. Wasn't holding you up, so there's nothing I can do to let you down. It doesn't take a trophy to make you proud. I'll never be more loved than I am right now.
Going through a storm, but I won't go down. I hear your voice carried in the rhythm of the wind to call me out. You would cross an ocean so I wouldn't drown.
you've spoken. I'm already loved more than I can imagine. That is enough. I'm already loved. I'm already loved. And I'm already chosen. Already chosen. I know who I am. Know who I am. I know what you've spoken. I'm already loved. More than I can imagine. More than I could imagine. That is enough. That is enough. I'm already loved. And I'm already chosen. Already chosen. I know who I am. Know who I am. I know what you've spoken. Know what you've spoken. And I'm already loved. Already loved. More than I can imagine. More than I could imagine. That is enough for me. That is enough. Yes, it is. 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 That is enough. That's enough. That is enough. That is enough. You are enough. You are enough. You are enough. So I am enough. I am enough. I am enough. 'Cause you are enough. You are Amen. Thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for worshiping. God bless you. Have a great week.